Laura Martinez stared at her laptop screen in her modest downtown Seattle apartment, the notification glowing on her phone beside her. The Facebook post had already received 43 likes and 17 comments. Her mother's words burned into her memory. "Disappointed in my daughter, who thinks she's too good for her family now. Some children forget where they came from." What her mother didn't know was that in 12 hours, Laura would be sitting across from the CEO of Pinnacle Dynamics during her annual performance review, and that same post would change everything. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The rain drummed against the windows of Laura's studio apartment as she prepared for another day at Pinnacle Dynamics, one of Seattle's most prestigious consulting firms. At 26, she had worked her way up from a junior analyst to a senior consultant, earning respect through late nights, flawless presentations, and an unwavering dedication that impressed even the most demanding clients. Laura carefully pressed her navy blazer, the same one she'd bought on clearance 3 years ago, but maintained meticulously. Her wardrobe was small but professional, each piece chosen strategically to project competence and reliability. She'd learned early in her career that appearance mattered in the corporate world, especially when you came from nothing. Her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate, Jessica Chen. "Good luck with your review today. You've got this, superstar." Jessica was one of the few people who knew about Laura's background, having grown up in similar circumstances before landing her job as a software engineer at a tech startup. Laura grabbed her worn leather portfolio, a graduation gift from her high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Patterson, who had believed in her when few others did. Inside were copies of her performance metrics, client testimonials, and the proposal she'd been working on for months, a revolutionary approach to organizational restructuring that could save companies millions while improving employee satisfaction. The commute to downtown Seattle took 45 minutes by bus. Laura used the time to review her notes, occasionally glancing at her reflection in the window. She'd inherited her father's sharp features and her mother's determined jaw, though lately that determination had been tested by increasing family tensions. Pinnacle Dynamics occupied the top 15 floors of the Columbia Center, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering breathtaking views of Elliott Bay and the Olympic Mountains. Laura badged into the building, nodding to Marcus Thompson, the security guard who always greeted her with a warm smile. "Big day today, Miss Martinez," Marcus said, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "Heard through the grapevine you might be getting some good news." Laura managed a smile. "We'll see, Marcus, keeping my fingers crossed." The elevator hummed as it carried her to the 42nd floor, where the consulting division buzzed with its usual morning energy. Laura's cubicle was organized to perfection, client files sorted by priority, her computer dual-monitor setup maximizing productivity, and a small succulent plant that somehow managed to thrive under the fluorescent lights. "Laura," called out David Kim, her closest colleague and friend at the firm. "Ready to knock their socks off today?" David was everything Laura wasn't. Born into privilege, Harvard MBA, family connections that opened doors before he even knocked. But unlike many of their colleagues from similar backgrounds, David had genuine respect for Laura's abilities and had become her ally in navigating the sometimes treacherous waters of corporate politics. "As ready as I'll ever be," Laura replied, settling into her chair and checking her calendar. The performance review was scheduled for 2 p.m., giving her time to finalize her presentation and mentally prepare for what could be a career-defining moment. The morning flew by in a blur of client calls and project updates. Laura had been managing the Henderson Industries account for 8 months, turning around what had been a struggling engagement and delivering results that exceeded all expectations. The client had specifically requested Laura's continued involvement, praising her innovative approaches and ability to understand their unique challenges. At lunch, Laura sat alone in the company cafeteria, reviewing her talking points one final time. She'd prepared for every possible question, every scenario she could imagine. What she hadn't prepared for was the notification that popped up on her phone at 1:47 p.m. The Facebook post from her mother, Sandra Martinez, had been live for 3 hours. The accompanying photo showed Laura at last year's company holiday party, smiling beside David and 2 other colleagues at an upscale restaurant downtown.
Her mother had captioned it, "My daughter thinks she's too important now to visit her family, living the high life while forgetting the people who raised her. Disappointed doesn't even begin to cover it." Laura's stomach dropped as she read the comments that had already accumulated. Family members and old family friends from her hometown of Bakersfield had chimed in with their opinions, some defending Laura, others joining in her mother's criticism. Her aunt Carmen had written, "Some people get a little success and think they're better than everyone else." Her cousin Miguel had added, "Laura always thought she was too good for the rest of us." The worst part wasn't the public humiliation. It was the kernel of truth buried in her mother's accusations. Laura had been avoiding visits home, making excuses about work commitments and travel schedules. The 2-hour drive to Bakersfield had become increasingly difficult as the gap between her current life and her past seemed to widen with each promotion, each professional achievement. Laura's hands trembled slightly as she closed Facebook and tried to compose herself. In 13 minutes, she would be sitting across from CEO Jonathan Whitfield and Director of Human Resources Patricia Stevens, discussing her future with the company. She couldn't afford to let family drama derail the most important meeting of her career. She made her way to the executive floor, her heels clicking against the polished marble as she approached the conference room. Through the glass walls, she could see Mr. Whitfield reviewing documents, his silver hair and expensive suit projecting the authority that had built Pinnacle Dynamics into an industry leader.
Patricia Stevens emerged from her office, tablet in hand, offering Laura a professional smile. "Laura, good to see you. Jonathan is just finishing up a call. How are you feeling about today?" "Confident," Laura replied, hoping her voice didn't betray the turmoil churning in her stomach. "I'm excited to discuss the Henderson results and share some ideas for expanding our service offerings." What Laura didn't know was that 15 minutes earlier, Jonathan Whitfield had received a phone call from Henderson Industries CEO, Robert Henderson himself. The conversation had been brief but impactful. Henderson wanted to discuss potentially bringing Pinnacle Dynamics in for a company-wide transformation project worth $12 million, specifically requesting Laura as the lead consultant. As Laura waited outside the conference room, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. Growing up in a small apartment above her mother's beauty salon, sharing a bedroom with her younger sister Maria until she left for college on a full scholarship, spending summers working in the fields alongside migrant workers, saving every penny for school supplies and eventually college application fees. Her mother had been proud then, bragging to customers about her daughter's perfect grades and scholarship to University of Washington. But somewhere along the way, that pride had curdled into resentment, as if Laura's success was somehow a betrayal of her roots rather than a celebration of them. The conference room door opened and Patricia gestured for Laura to enter. Jonathan Whitfield stood and extended his hand, his grip firm and confident. "Laura, please have a seat. I think you're going to find this conversation very interesting." As Laura settled into the leather chair across from the two executives, she had no idea that her mother's Facebook post was about to set in motion a chain of events that would reveal secrets, test loyalties, and ultimately change not just her career, but her understanding of everything she thought she knew about her own identity. The performance review was about to begin, and with it, the most pivotal 24 hours of Laura Martinez's life. Jonathan Whitfield leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled as he studied Laura across the polished conference table. "Laura, your work on the Henderson account has been nothing short of exceptional. Robert Henderson called me personally this morning." Laura felt her pulse quicken. Direct communication between CEOs was rare and usually significant. "He wants to discuss a comprehensive transformation project," Jonathan continued, $12 million over 18 months, and he specifically requested you as the lead consultant. The room fell silent, except for the soft hum of the building's climate control system. Laura had dreamed of this moment, leading a flagship project that could establish her as one of the firm's rising stars. But before she could respond, Patricia Stevens cleared her throat. "There is one matter we need to address first," Patricia said, her tone shifting to something more cautious. She opened her tablet and turned it toward Laura. "We received some concerning information this afternoon." Laura's heart sank as she recognized her mother's Facebook post displayed on the screen. The comments had multiplied since she had last checked, now showing dozens of responses from family members, family friends, and people from her hometown. Our social media monitoring system flagged this because your employment with Pinnacle Dynamics was mentioned in several comments, Patricia explained. In today's business environment, we have to be aware of how our consultants are perceived publicly, especially when they're representing our clients. Jonathan frowned as he read the post. Your mother seems quite upset. She mentions that you've forgotten your family, that you think you're too good for them now. Mr. Whitfield, I can explain, but Patricia held up her hand. Laura, we're not here to judge your personal relationships, but Henderson Industries is a family-owned business that prides itself on traditional values. Robert Henderson specifically chose you because he felt you understood the importance of loyalty and integrity. This post, it raises questions. Laura's mind raced. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd achieved was suddenly hanging in the balance because of her mother's public outburst. My relationship with my family is complicated, but it doesn't affect my professional capabilities or my commitment to our clients. I'm sure that's true, Jonathan said carefully, but perception matters in this business. Our clients trust us with their most sensitive challenges. They need to believe that their consultants have strong character and judgment. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Patricia scrolled through more comments on the post. There are several people here questioning your values, suggesting that success has changed you in negative ways. One comment from someone named Carmen Martinez, "Is that family?" "My aunt," Laura admitted quietly. She wrote, "Laura used to help out at the family business every summer. Now she's too fancy to even return phone calls. That doesn't paint a picture of someone who maintains strong relationships." Laura felt the walls closing in. My family doesn't understand the demands of this job. The travel, the client commitments, the hours required to deliver excellence. I've tried to explain, but clearly your explanations haven't been sufficient, Jonathan interrupted. Laura, I want to be direct with you. The Henderson Project could be a career-defining opportunity, but we need to be absolutely certain that there won't be any complications. What kind of complications? Laura asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Patricia leaned forward. Social media has made everyone's personal life public. If this family discord escalates, if there are more posts like this, it could reflect poorly on both you and the firm. Henderson Industries employs over 3,000 people across multiple generations of families. They value stability and loyalty above almost everything else. I understand, Laura said, trying to keep her voice steady. I can reach out to my mother, ask her to remove the post. It's not just about removing this post, Jonathan said. It's about the underlying issues it reveals. Laura, you're brilliant at your job. Your analytical skills, your presentation abilities, your client management, all top tier. But leadership requires more than technical competence. It requires emotional intelligence and the ability to maintain relationships even under pressure. The implication hung heavy in the air. Laura realized they weren't just discussing the Henderson Project. They were questioning her readiness for partnership track, for the senior leadership roles she'd been working toward. There's something else, Patricia said, her expression growing more serious. We did some additional research after seeing the post. Your employee file shows your emergency contact as Jessica Chen, your roommate. Most of our employees list family members. That's unusual for someone from a close-knit family background. Laura's throat tightened. She'd deliberately avoided listing family members as emergency contacts after an incident 2 years ago when her mother had called the office repeatedly during a family crisis, creating disruption and embarrassment. I chose Jessica because she's local and available. My family lives in Bakersfield, over 2 hours away. But surely a parent or sibling would want to be contacted in case of an emergency? Jonathan asked. Before Laura could answer, Patricia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her expression darkened. Laura, you might want to see this. She turned the tablet toward Laura again, this time showing a new Facebook post from her cousin Miguel. Just looked up Pinnacle Dynamics. Laura's making 6 figures while our whole family struggles. Meanwhile, she couldn't even come to Abuela's birthday last month. Money changes people, and not for the better. The post had been shared 4 times already, including by her mother, who had added her own comment. I raised her better than this. Success shouldn't mean abandoning the people who love you. This is escalating, Patricia observed, and now there are specific mentions of your salary and our firm. This kind of negative attention is exactly what we can't afford with the Henderson project. Laura felt something breaking inside her chest. Years of sacrifice, of working weekends while her college friends partied, of taking on impossible deadlines and delivering flawless results, all threatened by family drama she couldn't control. "What are you saying?" Laura asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jonathan exchanged a look with Patricia before answering. "We're saying that the Henderson project is too important to risk. We need someone who can represent Pinnacle Dynamics without any potential complications." "So you're giving it to someone else?" "We're considering all options," Patricia said diplomatically. "David Kim has been asking for more responsibility, and his family connections could actually be beneficial for client relations. His father sits on several corporate boards." The fulfillment was obvious now. David, with his Harvard pedigree and established family wealth, would never face scrutiny over his personal relationships, because his personal relationships were all advantages. His family's success reflected well on him, while Laura's family's struggles were seen as a liability. "I see," Laura said, fighting to keep her composure. "And my performance metrics? The fact that Henderson specifically requested me?" "Your performance has been excellent," Jonathan acknowledged, "but performance is just one factor in leadership decisions. We need to consider the complete picture." Laura's phone buzzed with a text message from David. "Hey, heard there might be some changes with Henderson. Just want you to know I had nothing to do with any decisions. You deserve that project." The irony wasn't lost on her. David, who would likely benefit from her setback, was showing more loyalty than her own family. "I'd like to request some time to address this situation," Laura said finally. "Give me 48 hours to resolve the social media issues and demonstrate that my personal life won't interfere with my professional responsibilities." Patricia and Jonathan exchanged a mother glance. "Laura, we appreciate your professionalism, but—" "48 hours," Laura repeated, her voice gaining strength. "If I can't resolve this to your satisfaction, then we can discuss alternative arrangements for the Henderson project." Jonathan considered this for a long moment. 48 hours. But Laura, understand that this isn't just about removing some Facebook posts. We need to see evidence that you can manage complex personal relationships while maintaining the professional standards our clients expect. As Laura left the conference room, her mind was already spinning with plans. She had 48 hours to save her career, but more than that, she had 48 hours to confront the growing chasm between who she'd become and where she'd come from. What she didn't know was that the Facebook post that threatened to destroy everything was about to become the catalyst for discoveries that would change not just her career trajectory, but her entire understanding of her family's history and her place in the world. The crisis had begun, but Laura Martinez was far from finished fighting. Laura's hands shook as she sat in her car in the Pinnacle Dynamics parking garage, staring at her phone screen. The Facebook notifications continued to pile up, each one a small dagger to her professional reputation. Her mother's original post now had over 200 reactions and 57 comments, many from people she hadn't spoken to in years. The worst part wasn't the criticism, it was the pain underneath her mother's words. Sandra Martinez had worked 3 jobs to put Laura through college, cleaning office buildings at night while running the beauty salon during the day. The woman who had celebrated every good grade, every scholarship, every achievement, now felt abandoned by the daughter she'd sacrificed everything to elevate. Laura's phone rang. David Kim's name appeared on the screen. "Laura, where are you? I just heard from Patricia's assistant that the Henderson meeting got moved up to tomorrow morning. They want to make a final decision on the project lead." The timeline had compressed from 48 hours to less than 18. Laura closed her eyes, feeling the walls closing in from every direction. "I'm in the parking garage," she said quietly. "David, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Of course." "Did you know about social media monitoring before today? Did you know they were going to use my family situation against me?" David was quiet for a long moment. Laura, I swear I didn't know about your family's posts, but I did hear Patricia mention to Jonathan last week that they were concerned about your cultural fit for senior leadership. I thought it was just corporate nonsense, but now, cultural fit. The phrase hit Laura like a physical blow. She'd heard it before, whispered in corporate hallways, a polite way of saying someone didn't belong in the upper echelons of business. Too ethnic, too working class, too different from the country club set that still dominated executive suites. Laura, you're twice as smart as half the partners here. This is temporary. We can figure out a way to. No, David, we can't. I've been fooling myself thinking that competence was enough, that results would speak for themselves, but the game was rigged from the beginning. Laura ended the call and started her car, pointing it toward Interstate 5 South. The drive to Bakersfield would give her time to think, to figure out how to salvage what remained of her career and her family relationships. The 2-hour drive stretched before her like a journey back through time. As downtown Seattle disappeared in her rearview mirror, replaced by suburban sprawl and then rural farmland, Laura felt the carefully constructed walls of her professional identity beginning to crumble. She left Bakersfield 8 years ago with 2 suitcases and a promise to herself that she'd never look back. The small Central Valley city had always felt like a trap to her, a place where dreams went to die under the relentless summer heat and economic stagnation. Most of her high school classmates had stayed, working in agriculture, retail, or service jobs that barely covered rent and groceries. But as the familiar landscape rolled past her windows, Laura began to remember what else she'd left behind. Friday night football games where the entire community came together. Quinceañeras that lasted until dawn, with 3 generations dancing to the same songs. Sunday dinners at her grandmother's house where 20 people somehow fit around a table meant for 8. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Maria. "Saw Mom's post. She's really upset, Laura. She thinks you're ashamed of us." The irony was crushing. Laura had never been ashamed of her family. She'd been ashamed of her own inability to bridge the growing gap between her 2 worlds. Every visit home had become more difficult as she struggled to relate to conversations about local gossip and family drama, while her mind remained focused on quarterly projections and client strategies. As Laura pulled into Bakersfield, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the flat valley floor. The mountains that ringed the city seemed smaller than she remembered, less imposing. Or maybe she'd just gotten used to the towering skyscrapers of Seattle's urban landscape. Her childhood neighborhood looked exactly the same: small stucco houses with chain-link fences, cars parked on brown lawns because garage space was reserved for storage. The Martinez Beauty Salon occupied the corner unit of a modest strip mall, its hand-painted sign faded but still proudly displaying Sandra Martinez, owner, in flowing script. Laura sat in her car for 10 minutes, watching customers come and go. Her mother moved through the salon with practiced efficiency, trimming hair and chatting with clients who'd been coming to her for decades. Sandra Martinez was 52 years old but looked older, the years of physical labor and financial stress etched in the lines around her eyes. Through the window, Laura could see the framed photograph that had hung behind the cash register for 6 years. Laura in her graduation cap and gown, beaming beside her proud mother outside the University of Washington's commencement ceremony. It was still there, still prominently displayed, despite everything. When Laura finally entered the salon, the familiar scent of hair products and industrial shampoo transported her instantly back to childhood afternoons spent doing homework at the back station while her mother worked. The conversation stopped as customers recognized her, their expressions ranging from curious to judgmental. "Mija," Sandra said quietly, setting down her scissors. "You came. We need to talk, Mom." Sandra nodded to her assistant, Rosa, who'd been working at the salon for 15 years. "Rosa, can you finish Mrs. Gutierrez? I'll be in the back." The small office behind the salon served as Sandra's command center, appointment book, supplier catalogs, and financial records covering every surface. A fold-out cot in the corner testified to the long hours Sandra often worked, sometimes sleeping at the salon when money was too tight to pay both business and personal rent on time. "I saw your post," Laura began, but Sandra held up her hand. Before you say anything, let me speak. Sandra's voice carried the authority that had kept the salon running through recessions, family crises, and countless challenges. Do you know what Mrs. Hernandez told me yesterday? She said her daughter in Los Angeles calls her every Sunday. Every Sunday, Laura. When was the last time you called me? The question hung in the air between them. Laura tried to remember, but couldn't pinpoint the last time she'd initiated contact with her mother. I've been busy with work, Mom, this project. There's always a project, always something more important than family. Sandra's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. I worked myself to the bone to give you opportunities I never had. I wanted you to have a better life, but I didn't want you to forget where you came from. I haven't forgotten. Haven't you? Sandra pulled out her phone, scrolling through Facebook. Look at these pictures from your company events. Designer clothes, expensive restaurants, charity galas. You look beautiful, mija, but you look like a stranger. Laura studied the photos her mother had found online, professional headshots, networking events, the company holiday party. In each image, she appeared polished and confident. But Sandra was right. She did look like someone else entirely. The worst part, Sandra continued, is that I'm proud of you. Even when I wrote that post, even when I was angry and hurt, I was still proud. But I'm also scared that I'm losing my daughter to a world that will never truly accept her. The words hit harder than any criticism. Laura sank into the plastic chair across from her mother's desk, the weight of the day's events finally overwhelming her. They're taking away my promotion, Laura said quietly, the biggest project of my career. Because of your post, because of our family drama, they think I'm not leadership material. Sandra's expression shifted from hurt to fierce protectiveness in an instant. They're punishing you for having a family that loves you? They're punishing me for having a family that doesn't fit their corporate image, a family that airs dirty laundry on social media and makes them worry about their precious reputation. Those people don't deserve you. Maybe not, but it's the only world I know how to navigate now. I've spent 8 years building this career, Mom. It's everything I have. Sandra studied her daughter's face, seeing exhaustion and defeat where once there had been determination and hope. When did you stop believing you were enough, just as you are? The question shattered something inside Laura. For the first time in years, she began to cry, not the controlled tears of professional frustration, but the raw, ugly sobs of someone who'd been carrying impossible weight for too long. As her mother's arms wrapped around her, Laura realized she'd hit bottom. Her career was derailing, her family relationships were fractured, and she felt completely alone in a world that had never really been meant for people like her. But sometimes, hitting bottom is the only way to find the solid ground needed to push back up. Laura woke up in her childhood bedroom, disoriented by the familiar yet foreign surroundings. The walls still bore faded posters from her high school years, motivational quotes about success and determination that now felt like relics from a different lifetime. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, and the sounds of the neighborhood coming to life filtered through the single-pane windows. Her phone showed 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Most were from work colleagues expressing concern about her sudden departure from Seattle, but one stood out, a message from an unknown number sent at 6:47 a.m. Ms. Martinez, this is Robert Henderson from Henderson Industries. I heard there might be some delays with the project assignment. I'd like to speak with you directly. Please call me at your earliest convenience. Laura stared at the message, her mind racing. Henderson Industries' CEO didn't typically reach out to individual consultants. Something had shifted overnight, but she couldn't figure out what. The smell of fresh coffee and frying eggs drew her from the bedroom. In the kitchen, her mother was preparing breakfast with the same methodical care she applied to everything in her life. Sandra had always been an early riser, a habit formed by decades of opening the salon before dawn to accommodate clients who worked day shifts. You were talking in your sleep, Sandra said without turning around. Something about quarterly reports and client retention. Even in your dreams you're working. Laura accepted the plate of eggs, beans, and fresh tortillas, comfort food that felt both nostalgic and nourishing after months of grabbed lunches and takeout dinners. Mom, I need to tell you something about my job that I've never shared with anyone. Sandra sat down across from her daughter, a coffee mug cradled in her hands. I'm listening. When I started at Pinnacle Dynamics, I thought success would be straightforward. Work hard, deliver results, advance based on merit. But there's this invisible network of connections and cultural codes that I never learned. Partners who golf together, clients who went to the same prep schools, informal mentorship that happens at country clubs I'll never be invited to join. You mean they discriminate? It's more subtle than that. They'd never admit to discrimination, but they evaluate cultural fit and leadership presence and client rapport, all subjective measures that somehow always favor people who look and sound like them. Sandra nodded slowly. Your father used to talk about the same thing at the construction company. He was the best foreman they had, but when promotion time came, it always went to someone's nephew or college buddy. Laura had rarely heard her mother mention her father, who had died in an industrial accident when Laura was 12. The life insurance settlement had been modest, but Sandra had stretched every dollar to keep Laura and Maria in school and the salon running. There's something I should show you, Sandra said, rising from the table. She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a wooden box Laura had never seen before. Inside were documents, photographs, and letters, some yellowed with age. Your father wasn't just a construction worker, Sandra began, pulling out a faded business license. He owned Martinez Construction Services. Small jobs at first, residential repairs, minor commercial projects, but he was building something. Laura studied the documents with growing amazement. Contracts for housing developments, correspondence with city planners, invoices for projects she'd never known existed. Her father had been an entrepreneur, not just a laborer. Why didn't you ever tell me this? After he died, the business fell apart. His partner cheated us out of most of the assets, claiming your father owed money he didn't actually owe. Without the connections or legal knowledge to fight back, I lost everything except this salon. Sandra's voice carried old pain, but also pride. I didn't want you to know because I didn't want you to feel responsible for rebuilding what we lost. Laura's phone rang, David Kim calling from Seattle. She let it go to voicemail, too absorbed in the revelations unfolding before her. There's more, Sandra continued, producing a manila envelope marked with a law firm's letterhead. This came last week. That's why I was so emotional when I wrote that Facebook post. Inside the envelope was a letter from Hartman Stevens & Associates, a law firm in Fresno. Laura read it twice before the words fully registered. They want to settle? Laura asked. Apparently, your father's former partner, Vincent Reyes, has been feeling guilty for 20 years. He's developed terminal cancer and wants to make amends before he dies. He's offering to return the properties he took from us, plus interest and damages. The settlement amount was staggering, nearly $2 million in current value, including several commercial properties in Bakersfield that had appreciated significantly over the decades. Mom, this is incredible. You could retire, travel, live comfortably for the rest of your life. I could, Sandra agreed, but that's not what your father would have wanted. He always said the business was meant to be a family legacy, something to pass down to you and Maria. Laura's mind reeled with the implications. Her family wasn't just working class. They were business owners, entrepreneurs, who had been wrongfully robbed of their inheritance. The narrative she'd constructed about her background, the shame she'd carried about her family's financial struggles, was based on incomplete information. Why are you telling me this now? Because watching you chase acceptance from people who will never value you made me realize I'd failed you in a different way. I protected you from the pain of what we lost, but I also kept you from understanding your true heritage. You don't come from poverty, mija. You come from builders, from people who created something from nothing. Laura's phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. Ms. Martinez, it's urgent that we speak today. There are developments regarding your consulting project that require immediate attention. Robert Henderson. This time, Laura called the number. Henderson answered on the first ring. Ms. Martinez, thank you for calling. I understand there have been some complications with Pinnacle Dynamics regarding your role on our project. Mr. Henderson, I should explain. Actually, I think I should explain something to you. After our conversation yesterday, I did some research on your background. Very impressive work at the university. Scholarship recipient, first-generation college graduate. That's exactly the kind of perspective we need for our transformation initiative. Laura was confused. I'm not sure I understand. Pinnacle Dynamics indicated that my family situation might be problematic for your company's values. Henderson laughed, a genuine, warm sound. Miss Martinez, Henderson Industries was founded by my grandfather, who started with nothing but a second-hand truck and determination to feed his family. We value hard work and authenticity over pedigree. In fact, the Facebook post your mother wrote convinced me that you're exactly the right person for this job. I'm sorry, what? One of my board members saw the post and shared it with me. A mother who's proud enough of her daughter to worry about losing her to success? A young woman who inspires that kind of devotion? That tells me more about your character than any corporate reference could. Laura sank into a kitchen chair, overwhelmed by the day's revelations. Mr. Henderson, I'm honored, but I should mention that Pinnacle Dynamics may not assign me to your project. About that, I've already informed Mr. Whitfield that Henderson Industries will only work with you directly. If Pinnacle Dynamics can't accommodate that requirement, we'll take our business elsewhere. I believe that gives you considerable leverage in your negotiations. After ending the call, Laura sat in stunned silence. Her mother watched her carefully, recognizing the shift in her daughter's demeanor. What just happened? I think, Laura said slowly, I just discovered that everything I thought I knew about power, success, and worth was wrong. The things I was ashamed of, our family, our background, our struggles, those are actually my greatest strengths. Sandra smiled, the first genuine smile Laura had seen from her mother in years. Your father always said that our family's superpower was resilience. We don't just survive difficult times, we learn from them and become stronger. Laura looked around the modest kitchen where she'd eaten countless meals, done homework, and dreamed of escape. For the first time, she saw it not as a place to flee from, but as the foundation that had made everything else possible. The awakening was complete. Laura Joaquimes was about to stop running from her identity and start leveraging it as the competitive advantage it had always been. But first, she had some calls to make and some people in Seattle who needed to learn exactly who they were dealing with. The girl who had left Bakersfield 8 years ago was gone. The woman who would return to Seattle would be something entirely new, someone who understood that her greatest strength lay not in hiding her roots, but in drawing power from them. Laura stood in the law offices of Hartman, Stevens and Associates, watching her mother sign the final settlement documents that would restore their family's stolen legacy. The mahogany conference room overlooked downtown Fresno, and through the windows, Laura could see the agricultural fields that stretched to the horizon, the same fields her ancestors had worked before building something greater. Attorney Rebecca Hartman, a sharp woman in her 50s, slid the completed paperwork into a leather portfolio. Mrs. Martinez, you should receive the first property transfer within 30 days. The liquid assets will be available immediately. I must say, it's unusual to see someone as eager as Mr. Reyes to make amends for past wrongs. Vincent Reyes sat across the table, aged and frail, but with clear eyes that met Sandra's gaze directly. I stole 20 years from your family, he said quietly. I can't give back the time, but I can return what was always rightfully yours. Sandra's response surprised everyone. Vincent, I forgive you. My husband always said that carrying anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. We're moving forward now. The grace in her mother's words filled Laura with pride. This was the strength that had sustained their family through decades of struggle, not bitterness or revenge, but the wisdom to transform pain into purpose. As they left the law office, Laura's phone rang. Jonathan Whitfield's name appeared on the screen. Laura, we need to talk. Henderson Industries has made their position very clear regarding the project leadership. Can you be in my office first thing tomorrow morning? Actually, Mr. Whitfield, I have some conditions for that meeting. There was a pause. Conditions? I want Patricia Stevens present, along with the entire Henderson project team. And I want David Kim there as well. If we're going to discuss this project, everyone who has input on the decision should hear what I have to say. Laura, I don't think you're in a position to make demands. With respect, sir, I think Robert Henderson's $12 million contract says otherwise. I'll see you at 9 a.m. Laura ended the call and turned to her mother, who was watching with a mixture of concern and admiration. Are you sure about this approach, Miha? Mom, for 8 years, I've been playing by rules designed to keep people like us on the sidelines. It's time to change the game. That evening, Laura and Sandra sat on the back porch of the family home, watching the sunset paint the San Joaquin Valley in shades of gold and orange. Maria had driven up from Los Angeles, bringing her 2 young children and her husband Carlos, a teacher who'd grown up in similar circumstances.
I can't believe Uncle Vincent finally came forward, Maria said, bouncing her 3-year-old daughter on her knee. Carlos and I have been talking about starting a tutoring center for kids from working families. With the settlement money, we could fund college scholarships, Sandra added, help other families avoid the struggles we faced. Laura listened to her family plan their future, struck by how naturally they thought in terms of community impact rather than personal accumulation. This was the value system she'd been taught to see as unsophisticated, when in reality it represented a form of wealth that Pinnacle Dynamics partners could never understand. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Girl, Seattle is buzzing with rumors. David Kim has been asking everyone about you. Also, word is that Henderson personally called Jonathan and read him the riot act. What are you planning? Laura smiled as she typed back, Justice. See you tomorrow night. The next morning, Laura drove back to Seattle with a clarity she'd never experienced. The 5-hour journey gave her time to organize her thoughts and prepare for what would either be the salvation or destruction of her corporate career. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, not the muted colors and conservative cuts she'd worn to blend in, but a bold red dress that commanded attention, paired with jewelry her grandmother had given her for college graduation. For the first time in years, she looked like herself rather than a careful approximation of what others expected. Pinnacle Dynamics' reception area felt different as Laura walked through it. The marble floors and expensive artwork that had once impressed her now seemed like elaborate stage dressing designed to intimidate rather than inspire. She nodded to Marcus, who grinned and gave her a thumbs up. "Looking good, Miss Martinez. Whatever you're planning, I'm rooting for ya." The conference room was packed when Laura arrived. Jonathan and Patricia sat at the head of the table, flanked by the Henderson project team, senior consultants who'd been with the firm for decades. David Kim occupied a chair near the window, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes sympathetic. "Laura," Jonathan began, "I appreciate you coming in. We've had some interesting conversations with Henderson Industries, and we need to discuss how to move forward constructively." "Before we begin," Laura said, placing her portfolio on the table, "I want to address the elephant in the room. Last week, you questioned my leadership potential based on my family's social media activity and my cultural background. Today, I'm here to explain why those concerns represent exactly the kind of thinking that's holding Pinnacle Dynamics back from true market leadership." Patricia shifted uncomfortably. "Laura, I don't think anyone questioned your cultural background." "You questioned my cultural fit. You worried about my family's values conflicting with client expectations. You suggested that David might be better suited for the Henderson project because of his family connections rather than his professional capabilities." David looked down at his hands, clearly uncomfortable with being drawn into the conversation. "Here's what you didn't know," Laura continued, opening her portfolio. "My family has just settled a legal case involving Martinez Construction Services, a business my father built before his death. The settlement value exceeds $2 million. My family isn't just working class, we're entrepreneurs who are illegally deprived of our business assets for 20 years. She slid copies of the settlement documents across the table. More importantly, Henderson Industries specifically chose me for this project because of my background, not in spite of it.
Robert Henderson built his company from nothing, and he recognizes authentic leadership when he sees it. Jonathan examined the documents with growing surprise. Laura, this is significant, but I'm not sure how it changes the fundamental concerns about professional image and client relations.
It changes everything because it exposes the flawed assumptions underlying those concerns. You assumed my family's struggles reflected poor values rather than external injustice. You assumed a working-class background meant inferior judgment rather than superior resilience. You assumed cultural conformity was more valuable than authentic diversity. Laura pulled out her phone and displayed the Facebook post that had started everything. This post, which you saw as a liability, actually demonstrates something Henderson Industries values highly: a family that cares enough to fight for each other. In your world, family dysfunction is hidden behind charity galas and private clubs. In my world, we address problems directly, even when it's messy. The room was silent as Laura's words sank in. Patricia cleared her throat nervously. Laura, we appreciate your perspective, but corporate reputation management requires authentic leaders who can connect with diverse stakeholders, Laura interrupted. Henderson Industries employs thousands of people from backgrounds like mine. They need consultants who understand their experiences, their challenges, their motivations. Cultural competence isn't about fitting into country clubs, it's about building bridges across different communities. David finally spoke up. Laura's right. I've been thinking about this since yesterday. My Harvard connections might open doors, but they don't help me understand what motivates a factory worker in Ohio or a small business owner in Texas. That's Laura's superpower. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, reassessing the situation. What exactly are you proposing, Laura? I'm proposing that Pinnacle Dynamics embrace what makes it unique, rather than trying to copy every other consulting firm. I'm proposing that we lead the Henderson project as originally planned, but with a broader mandate to develop consulting approaches that work for companies with diverse workforces and authentic leadership. Laura stood and moved to the whiteboard, her confidence growing with each word. Henderson Industries isn't just a $12 million project. It's a proof of concept for a new kind of consulting that serves the real economy, not just the elite networks that have dominated business for decades. She began sketching out a framework that combined traditional strategic analysis with cultural competency and authentic stakeholder engagement. The methodology drew on everything she'd learned in her corporate career, enhanced by insights from her family's entrepreneurial experience and community-centered values. This approach could differentiate us in the market, Patricia admitted, studying Laura's framework. There are hundreds of companies like Henderson, successful businesses built by people who value substance over style. Exactly, Laura said. We're sitting on a massive competitive advantage, but only if we're brave enough to embrace it. Jonathan exchanged a look with Patricia, then addressed the room. I think we need to seriously consider this proposal. Laura, you'll lead the Henderson project as originally planned, but I want you to develop this broader consulting framework as well. If it works, it could reshape our entire practice. As the meeting concluded and colleagues filed out, David approached Laura with genuine admiration. That was brilliant. You didn't just save your career, you revolutionized it. Laura smiled, feeling the weight of 8 years of self-doubt finally lifting from her shoulders. I didn't revolutionize anything. I just stopped pretending to be someone else and started being myself. The preparation phase was complete. Laura Martinez had transformed from someone trying to escape her identity into someone ready to weaponize it for positive change. The real work was just beginning. 6 weeks later, the Henderson Industries headquarters in Portland buzzed with unprecedented energy. The company's quarterly all-hands meeting had been transformed into something resembling a corporate revival, with employees at every level sharing stories of increased engagement and improved processes. Laura stood before an audience of 800 Henderson employees, her presentation remote clicking to reveal metrics that exceeded every expectation. Employee satisfaction had jumped 23%, operational efficiency was up 18%,
Most remarkably, voluntary turnover had dropped to the lowest levels in company history. The transformation we've witnessed isn't about implementing new systems, Laura explained to the packed auditorium. It's about recognizing and amplifying the strengths that already existed within your workforce. When we stopped treating diverse backgrounds as problems to manage and started seeing them as assets to leverage, everything changed. Robert Henderson watched from the front row, his weathered face creased with satisfaction. Beside him sat his daughter, Sarah Henderson Walsh, the company's COO, who had initially been skeptical of bringing in outside consultants. Her conversion to Laura's methodology had been total and enthusiastic. 6 months ago, my father insisted we work with this young consultant from Seattle. I'll admit, I questioned whether someone from a big city firm could understand our company culture. I was completely wrong. The audience laughed as Sarah gestured toward Laura. Miss Martinez didn't just understand our culture, she helped us realize we'd been undervaluing it. The principles that built Henderson Industries weren't old-fashioned obstacles to modern business. They were competitive advantages waiting to be unleashed. In the audience, Patricia Stevens sat with a digital recorder, documenting the testimonials for Pinnacle Dynamics case study archives. The firm had already received inquiries from 6 major corporations interested in Laura's authentic leadership integration methodology. What had begun as damage control for one client relationship had evolved into the fastest-growing service line in company history. But the real test was about to begin. As the Henderson presentation concluded, Laura's phone buzzed with a message from Jonathan. Emergency board meeting, Seattle, tomorrow 8 a.m. Competitor challenge incoming. The flight back to Seattle gave Laura time to review the intelligence David had gathered. Morrison Consulting Group, Pinnacle Dynamics' primary rival, had been aggressively pursuing several of Laura's new clients. Their strategy was predictable but effective, questioning whether a social experiment could deliver sustainable business results. They're targeting the Brennan Industries contract specifically, David explained as they shared a taxi from SeaTac Airport. Morrison's pitch claims that your cultural diversity approach is a temporary trend that will collapse under market pressure. Laura studied the competition analysis David had compiled. Morrison Consulting represented everything she'd once aspired to become. Prestigious, traditional, connected to old money networks that treated business as an exclusive gentleman's club. What's their primary argument? That proven methodologies based on established business schools and time-tested approaches are more reliable than experimental programs designed around social inclusion. They're essentially arguing that your success with Henderson is an anomaly. The Pinnacle Dynamics boardroom had been reconfigured for what Jonathan called a strategic capabilities presentation. 8 board members sat around the polished table, including 2 external advisors Laura had never met. The atmosphere was tense with the weight of major financial decisions. Ladies and gentlemen, Jonathan began, we're here to evaluate competing approaches for the Brennan engagement. This contract represents $60 million over 3 years, potentially expanding to multiple subsidiary companies. Morrison Consulting's team entered with military precision. Lead partner, Bradford Morrison III, commanded attention through sheer presence. 6 feet tall, silver-haired, carrying the confidence of someone who'd never questioned his place in the world. His presentation was flawless, incorporating case studies from Fortune 100 companies and testimonials from CEOs whose names appear regularly in business publications. Bradford Henderson explained, his voice carrying the authority of decades in boardrooms. A family-owned manufacturing company struggling to compete with global suppliers while maintaining profitability. This situation requires proven methodologies, not experimental approaches.
Morrison's slides showcased impressive statistics from previous engagements, all following traditional restructuring models that prioritized efficiency over employee considerations. His team presented like a well-oiled machine, each member reinforcing the core message: stability, predictability, established success. The alternative approach being proposed, Morrison continued, his tone suggesting he was discussing something distasteful, represents a significant risk to sustainable outcomes.
Building business strategy around cultural sensitivity and employee emotional needs introduces variables that cannot be controlled or measured effectively. Board member Helen Crawford, whose family had founded one of Seattle's oldest investment firms, nodded approvingly. Mr. Morrison, your firm's track record speaks for itself. How do you respond to claims that traditional consulting approaches have become outdated? Madam Crawford, fundamental business principles are timeless. Profitability, operational efficiency, strategic positioning, these concepts don't change based on social trends. While we appreciate the idealism behind inclusive methodologies, shareholders ultimately require concrete results, not social experimentation. Laura watched the board members' faces, seeing the comfort that Morrison's traditional approach provided. His presentation offered certainty in an uncertain world, promising that old formulas would continue producing reliable outcomes. When Morrison's team concluded, Jonathan gestured toward Laura. Ms. Martinez, would you please present your alternative proposal? Laura stood, feeling the weight of 8 pairs of skeptical eyes. Instead of moving to the presentation screen, she remained at the table, making direct eye contact with each board member. 6 months ago, I would have given you a presentation very similar to what you just heard from Morrison Consulting: charts, statistics, proven methodologies based on business school frameworks. But I've learned something that's fundamentally changed how I think about business transformation. She paused, letting the silence draw attention. The companies that will dominate the next decade aren't the ones following yesterday's playbooks. They're the ones brave enough to unleash the full potential of their human resources. Board member Thomas Zhang, whose technology investments had made him one of Seattle's wealthiest individuals, leaned forward with interest. Ms. Martinez, that sounds inspirational, but how do you quantify potential? Mr. Zhang, let me tell you about Henderson Industries' Q3 results. 23% increase in employee satisfaction translated directly into 18% operational efficiency gains. But here's the number that matters most. Voluntary turnover dropped to 2.1%, saving the company $8 million annually in recruitment and training costs. Laura activated the presentation screen, but instead of charts, it displayed video testimonials from Henderson employees at every organizational level. Assembly line workers described feeling heard and valued for the first time in their careers. Middle managers talked about implementing suggestions they'd harbored for years but never felt empowered to share. Senior executives celebrated breakthrough innovations that emerged from collaborative problem-solving sessions. Morrison Consulting would have approached Henderson with predetermined solutions based on industry benchmarks, Laura continued. We started by asking Henderson's people what they needed to succeed, then built systems around their insights. The difference in results speaks for itself. Bradford Morrison requested permission to respond. Ms. Martinez, Henderson Industries is a unique situation, a family-owned company with unusual leadership flexibility. Brennan Industries operates in a much more competitive environment with shareholder pressures that require immediate cost reductions. Actually, Mr. Morrison, that makes our approach even more valuable, Laura replied. Brennan Industries has been struggling precisely because they've been following traditional consulting recommendations for 5 years. Cost-cutting, workforce reductions, process standardization, all the methods your firm would recommend. The results have been declining market share and increasing employee disengagement. She clicked to display Brennan Industries' performance metrics over the previous 5 years, showing a clear correlation between traditional consulting implementations and deteriorating business outcomes. Brennan's workforce includes third-generation employees whose families built that company. Morrison's approach would treat them as expendable resources to be optimized. Our approach would treat them as competitive assets to be amplified. Helen Crawford's expression had shifted from skepticism to curiosity. Ms. Martinez, how do you respond to concerns about the experimental nature of your methodology? Mrs. Crawford, with respect, there's nothing experimental about recognizing human potential. What's experimental is assuming that approaches designed for homogeneous workforces in the 1980s will succeed with diverse teams in the 2020s. Laura moved to the whiteboard, sketching a framework that connected employee engagement metrics to financial performance indicators.
Morrison Consulting offers Brennan Industries a 12% efficiency gain through workforce reduction. We're offering them a 30% productivity increase through workforce optimization. The room fell silent as board members processed the implications. Thomas Zhang was the first to speak. Ms. Martinez, if you can deliver those results, this methodology could revolutionize how we approach every client engagement. Mr. Zhang, it already has. The 3 clients we've implemented this approach with have all requested contract extensions and additional services. Morrison Consulting promises short-term cost savings. We deliver long-term competitive advantage.
Bradford Morrison's composure finally cracked. This is exactly the kind of idealistic thinking that creates unrealistic expectations. Business transformation requires difficult decisions and unpopular changes. You can't manage complex organizations by making everyone feel good. Laura smiled, recognizing the opening she'd been waiting for. Mr. Morrison, I agree that business transformation requires difficult decisions. The most difficult decision is admitting that traditional consulting approaches have been failing clients for decades because they ignore the human element that drives all business success. She turned to address the full board. Morrison Consulting will implement the same strategies they've used for 30 years, achieving the same mediocre results that drove Brennan Industries to seek help in the first place. We'll create something entirely new, a transformation that makes Brennan Industries the employer of choice in their industry while simultaneously making them the most profitable. The confrontation was complete. 2 philosophies, 2 approaches, 2 visions for the future of business consulting had been laid bare. The board would decide not just who won the Brennan contract, but which direction Pinnacle Dynamics would embrace going forward. As the meeting concluded, Laura knew that everything she'd built over the past 6 months hung in the balance. But for the first time in her career, she felt completely confident in who she was and what she represented. Win or lose, she would never again apologize for her authenticity. 3 months later, Laura stood on the factory floor of Brennan Industries in Milwaukee, watching something extraordinary unfold. The manufacturing line hummed with an energy she'd never witnessed in any corporate environment. Workers collaborating seamlessly, supervisors actively listening to floor suggestions, and management implementing real-time improvements based on frontline insights. Ms. Martinez, you need to see this, called Janet Kowalski, a 20-year veteran machinist whose improvement proposal had just reduced production time by 8 minutes per unit. My nephew graduated from UW-Madison with an engineering degree, but he couldn't figure out what I solved in 10 minutes watching the bottleneck. Laura smiled, remembering the skepticism she'd encountered from Brennan's leadership team just 12 weeks earlier. CEO Michael Brennan had awarded Pinnacle Dynamics the contract after Laura's board presentation, but his confidence had wavered during the first implementation meetings. You want us to ask assembly workers about strategic planning? Michael had questioned during their initial session. These people punch time clocks and follow procedures. They're not business strategists. Now, Michael stood beside Laura, his amazement genuine as he watched his workforce operate with unprecedented efficiency and innovation. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I have been running this company for 15 years, but I never really understood what we were capable of. The transformation metrics spoke for themselves. Brennan Industries had achieved a 32% productivity increase, exceeding even Laura's ambitious projections. More importantly, employee satisfaction scores had reached all-time highs, and the company was receiving unsolicited applications from competitors' workers seeking to join what had become known as the most innovative manufacturing environment in the Midwest. Laura's phone buzzed with a message from David. Board meeting results are in. You're going to want to sit down for this news. 20 minutes later, Laura was on a video call with the entire Pinnacle Dynamics leadership team. Jonathan Whitfield's expression carried a mixture of pride and disbelief. Laura, the board has voted unanimously to restructure our entire consulting practice around your authentic leadership integration methodology, but that's not the biggest news. Patricia Stevens leaned into the camera frame, her excitement barely contained. Morrison Consulting Group has requested a merger discussion. They want to license your approach for their Fortune 500 clients. The irony wasn't lost on Laura.
Bradford Morrison III, who had dismissed her methodology as social experimentation, was now seeking to acquire it after watching Pinnacle Dynamics secure 7 major contracts in 3 months using Laura's framework. There's more, Jonathan continued. Harvard Business School has reached out about developing a case study on your approach. They want to interview you for their executive education program. Laura felt a familiar tension in her chest, the old instinct to feel validated by establishment recognition. But something had fundamentally shifted in her relationship with external approval. She no longer needed Harvard's blessing to know her work had value. I appreciate the recognition, Laura replied carefully, but I want to make sure any case study focuses on the communities and workers whose insights made this possible, not just the consultant who listened to them. That evening, Laura drove to Bakersfield for her monthly family dinner, a tradition she'd established after reconciling with her mother. The Martinez family had used their settlement money to purchase a larger building for the salon, expanding it into a full-service community center that offered business training, financial literacy, and college preparation services. Sandra emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of tamales, her face glowing with the satisfaction of meaningful work. Mija, Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter, just got accepted to UC Davis with a full scholarship. She wants to study agricultural engineering and come back to help local farmers. The community center had become a symbol of what was possible when success was shared rather than hoarded. Families throughout Bakersfield were discovering opportunities they'd never imagined, supported by programs designed around their specific needs and cultural strengths. "Mom, I have some news to share with everyone," Laura announced as the extended family gathered around the expanded dining table. 23 people now attended the monthly dinners: cousins, in-laws, family friends who'd become honorary relatives. "Harvard Business School wants to study my consulting work. They're calling it a revolutionary approach to organizational development." The room erupted in celebration, but Laura held up her hand. "But I told them I'm only interested if they also study at this community center. What we've built here represents the same principles I use with corporate clients: recognizing existing strengths, building on cultural assets, and creating systems that serve people rather than forcing people to serve systems." Maria, now running the center's educational programs with her husband Carlos, raised her glass. To Laura, who never forgot that success means lifting others up, not leaving them behind.
As the evening progressed, Laura found herself on the back porch with her mother, watching the sunset paint the San Joaquin Valley in brilliant oranges and purples. The landscape looked the same as it had during her childhood, but Laura's perception had completely transformed. "I spent so many years thinking I had to choose between this world and my professional ambitions," Laura reflected. "I never realized they could strengthen each other." Sandra nodded thoughtfully. "Your father used to say that our family's superpower was seeing possibilities where others saw problems. You inherited that gift, but you had to travel pretty far from home to understand how valuable it was." Laura's phone rang, David calling from Seattle with urgent news. "Laura, you're not going to believe this. Robert Henderson just called Jonathan personally. He wants to expand our contract to include all Henderson Industries subsidiaries. We're talking about $120 million over 5 years." "That's incredible news, David." "But here's the really crazy part. Henderson is requiring that any consulting firm working on the expanded project must demonstrate cultural competency and authentic leadership principles. He's essentially forcing the entire industry to adopt your methodology." After ending the call, Laura sat in contemplative silence. The girl who had left Bakersfield 8 years ago had dreamed of corporate success, partnership track advancement, and recognition from elite business circles. She'd achieved all of those goals, but the victory felt different than she'd imagined. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Saw the Harvard news online. So proud of you. Also, your old neighbor Mrs. Patterson called. She wants to nominate you for the university's Distinguished Alumni Award." Mrs. Patterson, the high school guidance counselor who had believed in Laura when she couldn't afford college application fees. The woman who had given her the leather portfolio she still carried to every important meeting. The recognition from someone who had seen her potential before she understood it herself meant more than any corporate honor.
3 weeks later, Laura stood before a packed auditorium at the University of Washington, delivering the keynote address for the business school's graduation ceremony. But instead of the traditional success story graduates expected, she shared something more complex and meaningful. 5 years ago, I thought success meant escaping my background, Laura told the audience of soon-to-be business leaders. I believed that professional advancement required cultural assimilation, that leadership meant conforming to established norms rather than challenging them. She paused, making eye contact with students whose faces reflected the same uncertainty she'd carried through her own college years. I was completely wrong. The greatest competitive advantage any of you possess isn't your technical skills or academic achievements. It's your authentic perspective, the unique insights that come from your specific background, your family story, your community's values. In the audience, Sandra Martinez sat with tears of pride streaming down her face. Beside her, Mrs. Patterson clutched the same tissue she'd been using since Laura began speaking. Don't spend your careers trying to become someone else's version of successful, Laura continued. The world needs leaders who understand that diversity isn't a corporate buzzword, it's a strategic imperative. Companies that learn to harness the full spectrum of human potential will dominate the next economy. Those that don't will become irrelevant. As the ceremony concluded and Laura accepted her Distinguished Alumni Award, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The Facebook post that had nearly destroyed her career had become the catalyst for discovering her true purpose. The family shame she'd tried to hide had transformed into her greatest professional asset. 6 months later, Laura Martinez stood in the lobby of Martinez Consulting Partners, the firm she'd launched with David Kim as her business partner and her sister Maria heading community outreach initiatives. The office occupied 2 floors of a renovated building in downtown Seattle, with satellite locations in Bakersfield, Milwaukee, and Portland. Their client roster included Fortune 500 corporations alongside community organizations, government agencies, and nonprofit groups. The firm's motto, displayed prominently behind the reception desk, captured everything Laura had learned about authentic leadership: strength through story, success through service. As Laura prepared for her afternoon client call, a manufacturing cooperative in North Carolina seeking to expand while maintaining their worker-owned structure, she smiled at the framed photograph on her desk. It showed the original Martinez Beauty Salon, with her mother's handwritten sign still hanging in the window. Laura Martinez had finally come home, not to a place, but to herself. And in doing so, she had revolutionized not just her own career, but an entire industry's understanding of what real leadership could accomplish. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.